Question period. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this tired and out-of-touch government is failing to deliver on the #1 issue facing Saskatchewan families, the cost of living. And new numbers from Statistics Canada released last Friday show just how real this challenge is for people here at home. During this Premier's time in office, household incomes in this province have dropped by $1,600. Mr. Speaker, that's minus 2.4%, the second biggest drop amongst all provinces. Meanwhile, inflation rose by 16%. Mr. Speaker, everything costs more and families are making less. Why won't the Premier give people a break and cut the fuel tax?
You're here.
Recognize the Premier.
Yet again, Mr. Speaker, I would direct the members opposite to the budget documents, where in virtually every income category, Saskatchewan, the city of Regina and Saskatchewan remains one of the most affordable places to live in the nation of Canada. Mr. Speaker, this is due to decisions that we have made in previous years, the last 17 or so years, Mr. Speaker, decisions like that that have removed 112,000 people from the tax rolls by increasing the level of income on where you start to pay provincial income tax, Mr. Speaker. We've discussed that many times on the floor of this Assembly. The largest inflationary pressure that Canadian families are facing today is that of the federally induced carbon tax, or imposed carbon tax, Mr. Speaker, of which the members opposite just travelled to Ottawa to Trudeau campaign school, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that that government and that policy can continue into the future, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is very obvious that Trudeau's choice in this province is the NDP, Mr. Speaker, and when you look back through the various premiers that we've had, the NDP premiers in this province, whether it be Blakeney, Romano, Calvert, I think we can all agree, we may not have agreed with their policies, but they agreed that we would all agree they had the best interest of Saskatchewan people in mind. I'm not sure we can say that about today's NDP that is interested in re-electing Jagmeet and Justin.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we have a Premier laughing in his own clever lines. Well, 60% of people in this province are having trouble paying their bills. That's some look. Mr. Speaker, the reason that families are earning less in this province is because that Premier never stands up for Saskatchewan jobs. He's handing contract, Mr. Speaker, after contract to out-of-province companies to the right donors with the right connections. We saw that with the bypass, $1 billion contract handed over to a French company, and we see that with the tire deal that the Saskatoon Chamber notes sandbagged, Mr. Speaker, a local business. Right. Why does this Premier always choose to create jobs outside our province instead of standing up for jobs here in Saskatchewan?
Recognize the Minister of Government Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we hear every day the Leader of the Opposition say the same thing in every room. But let's hear what's happening in this room. We've got a member opposite that has done nothing but slander a former cabinet minister in this room, Mr. Speaker. We've got people on the opposition that don't want to have any more corporate donations into Saskatchewan and Saskatchewan politics. And we also have a Leader of the Opposition that has just today said, no out of province. It's got to be in province. Well, Mr. Speaker, let me read from an email that the NDP party sent to who? Prairie Sky Strategies, that happens to employ the member that they are discrediting. And you know why they sent them a letter, Mr. Speaker? They're begging and pleading for $5,000 donation for that Leader of the Opposition. Say the same thing in every room. Tell your party that.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there's some worked up over there today, and no wonder with what's coming out in this province about how this government is failing the people of this province. Mr. Speaker, it is the job of the Premier of Saskatchewan to work to create jobs here in Saskatchewan. Right. And by every measure, Mr. Speaker, that Premier is failing at his job. This is a Premier with the worst job creation record in Canada. All at a time when, Mr. Speaker, there's opportunity in every corner of this province, and so many people want to be part of it. Mr. Speaker, when we're looking at Saskatchewan projects paid for by Saskatchewan tax dollars, why won't this Premier hire Saskatchewan and make sure Saskatchewan jobs always come first?
Recognize the Minister of Government Relations.
Mr. Speaker, does that opposition member mean the Saskatchewan jobs that they're applying to Prairie Sky Strategies in Calgary for, Mr. Speaker? Is that the same Saskatchewan jobs? Mr. Speaker, let me read. It says, you can register for tickets or sponsorship. And then it goes on at the bottom. I'll follow up with you a phone call next week. Boy, does that sound like begging for corporate sponsorship from Alberta.
Hear, hear. Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel over there, and I'll note that the Premier can't even find his feet to stand up for Saskatchewan. The Sask Party's plan, Mr. Speaker, isn't for Saskatchewan jobs. It's a plan for jobs in Calgary, Alberta, in Paris, France, or in Kansas City, Missouri, Mr. Speaker, or Newport Beach, California, or literally anywhere but here at home. Mr. Speaker, that is that Premier's record, and that's why we need a higher Saskatchewan plan. That's why people are falling behind, and that's why, Mr. Speaker, and we hear this every day, it's time for a change. Why can't the Premier stand up for Saskatchewan jobs?
Recognize the Minister of Sask Builds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to stand here and tell my fellow members and the people of Saskatchewan about the great projects happening in our province. I'm pleased to say that over 82% of the contracts have been awarded to Saskatchewan-based companies. Mr. Speaker, in fact, when there's a Saskatchewan bidder, Saskatchewan companies secure the contracts approximately 90% of the time in these competitions. These projects are using the best local Saskatchewan workers, creating jobs and employment opportunities for the people of our great province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all they have to do is go to schools like the new Francophonia School in North Regina, talk to them and their employees. A good Saskatchewan Corex company is building that school, Mr. Speaker. Go talk to them. Mr. Speaker, the new Joint Use School in Coronation Park is being built by Westridge. Maybe the members opposite go talk to them about the good Saskatchewan jobs. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Quite the desperate little performance we have here today, Mr. Speaker. The Sask Party is failing to protect Saskatchewan jobs. We need look no further than their choice to hand a tire recycling contract to a company from Newport Beach, California. The Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce said this, quote, sandbag the local business already doing the work. And when the Chamber submitted an FOI to that Minister of Environment for the study that justified the entire fiasco, the Ministry fully denied this request. It was redacted 100%, Mr. Speaker. Why won't the Minister of Environment release this study and show some basic transparency?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try and pick bits and pieces out of that question, because there were like 4 or 5 questions in that one. Tire stewardship, and I will say it slow for the members opposite, of Saskatchewan is an independent, industry-based organization that manages tire recycling in the province. The government of Saskatchewan has no role in awarding any procurement contract. The ministry role is one of oversight to ensure all the commitments are fulfilled under the scrap tire recycling program. And I'll leave it at that, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce recently took to social media to voice their concerns. Quote from their CEO, the agency responsible to collect and manage scrap tire recycling has been operating outside its mandate and has sandbagged a Saskatchewan success story, not to mention over 60 good local jobs in Saskatoon, end quote. This government has in its possession the study that apparently justified this whole shady affair, Mr. Speaker. The Chamber has reiterated their request for that report just 5 minutes ago in an open letter. Why won't the Environment Minister release that document today?
Just want to caution the member about your language. Yes. Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Yeah, the ethics and democracy over there. Tire Stewardship of Saskatchewan is an independent, industry-based organization that manages tire recycling in the province. The ministry, wow, you're observant. The Ministry of Environment's role is one of oversight to ensure that all the commitments are fulfilled under scrap tire recycling program, Mr. Speaker. If the members opposite or anyone else wishes to seek the report that talks about the division of the province, then they can go to TSS. Thank you.
Recognize the member from the John Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this isn't just about jobs, it's about transparency, and the Sask Party government is infamously awful at both. This whole fiasco stems from a study by the government that apparently shows there's a need for 2 tire processors in the province. That's why apparently they needed to split the province into 2 regions and exclude the local business already doing the work. What do we have today? Fewer jobs and a company based in Newport Beach, California, now doing the work. If the Sask Party thinks this is all above board, then they simply need to prove it and release that report.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
As was said earlier, Mr. Speaker, Tire Stewardship of Saskatchewan is an independent, industry-based organization that manages tire recycling in the province. Mr. Speaker, if this report was generated through Tire Stewardship Saskatchewan, that report belongs to them. It does not belong to the government, and government did not initiate the report or contract to have the report undertaken, Mr. Speaker. There you have it.
Recognize the member from the John Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this tire fire of a deal keeps burning out of control. Local businesses, the Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce, former friends of this Sask Party government, they're all speaking out about this deal. Over 60 jobs lost. An RFP designed to exclude the company already doing the work. The Chamber is saying that the agency this minister is responsible for operated outside its mandate. It's past time this Minister of Environment takes some responsibility for her file and release those documents. Will she do it today?
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, the documents the member is referring to throughout all of that diatribe is Tire Stewardship of Saskatchewan has ownership. They contracted to get that report done, Mr. Speaker, so I do suggest that the member go to TSS and ask them for that report.
Recognize a member from the John Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, she is the minister responsible. Right. She can provide that report, Mr. Speaker. And while she's at it, Mr. Speaker, we would like to see the review conducted by former Deputy Minister Cam Swan, as well as the proposal dated October 19, 2020, titled Proposed Product Stewardship Program for Scrap Tire Management, the proposal that is contingent to that ministry approving TSS to do this work. Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, Tire Stewardship Saskatchewan is an independent, industry-based organization that manages tire recycling in the province. Delegated authority by the province to this particular entity and organization. The Government of Saskatchewan has no role in awarding or procuring any of the contracts that have been cited here today. The ministry's role is one of oversight to ensure that all commitments are fulfilled under the scrap tire recycling program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear this tired and out-of-touch government is failing on jobs, and they're absolutely failing on education too. Just a few weeks back, that minister asked school divisions and trustees to use their voices on education funding. And Saskatoon Public Schools has answered that call. They put out a letter last week laying out the cuts that they've been forced to make because of this government's underfunding of our classrooms.
Right.
Home economics and industrial arts for grade 8, gone. Busing for entire neighbourhoods, gone. Librarians, gone. There are now 3 librarians covering the entire city. That's 59 schools with 3 librarians, Mr. Speaker. Does that minister take any responsibility for the cuts at Saskatoon Public Schools?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I communicate with Saskatoon Public on a regular basis, as I do with school divisions all over the province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can let the member know that in the largest ever school operating funding increase in this year's budget, Mr. Speaker, Saskatoon Public received a 10.3% increase to their school operating funding.
Hear, hear. Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
Mr. Speaker, this minister should know his government's record of blaming school divisions for those difficult decisions. But these are Sask party cuts at the core, Mr. Speaker.
Right.
The school division reports receiving a 7.7% increase, of which 7.4% is going solely to manage enrollment growth and inflation. Now, those factors are important, but that only leaves 0.3% to address class size, to address complexity, and to bring back all of those programs that have been cut under this tired and out-of-touch government. Why won't that Sask party minister take any responsibility for the cuts that they force on Saskatoon Public Schools through their record of underfunding?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in case the member opposite missed it in my initial answer, Saskatoon Public will receive $286 million, the school operating grant, this next school year, an increase of $26.7 million, or 10.3%, Mr. Speaker. That's on top of the significant capital announcements that we made in the city of Saskatoon to address some of the large enrollment increases that we're seeing in that community. We are going to be building the largest school that we've ever seen in this province when we build that high school on the east side of Saskatoon and Holmwood, Mr. Speaker. This is a government that continues to invest in education, both on the operating side and on the capital side.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Eastview.
And Mr. Speaker, did he read the letter and the infographic sent out by the division last week?
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to get it. Luckily, Saskatoon Public Schools broke it down very simply with pictures for that minister to understand. Their per-student funding in Saskatoon is just over $10,000. If funding had kept pace with inflation, it would be $2,500 higher today. The result is that there are not enough teachers and supports are being cut, supports that our students need. Does the minister see the problem, or is he accusing the division, Saskatoon Public Schools, of getting their math wrong?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, I would just remind the member opposite, this is the largest school operating funding increase that we have seen in this province, Mr. Speaker, in provincial history, Mr. Speaker. That means school divisions, whether it's Saskatoon Public or any other place in the province, Mr. Speaker, that means they have more dollars this year than they've had before to work with students, provide services that they need, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am actively out there listening in Saskatoon Public. I visited 2 Saskatoon Public schools on Friday, Mr. Speaker, with members of the board, Mr. Speaker. The only school that member opposite likes to go visit is Justin Trudeau Campaign School.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that government is failing on education, and it is crystal clear that they are failing on health care, Mr. Speaker. We learned last week that cancer patients needing chemotherapy at the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital would no longer receive free parking. The SHA claims that this change is because of misuse of free parking passes. But instead of working to ensure that the most vulnerable still have access, they cut the program altogether. What does the minister have to say to the cancer patients that now have to pay to receive treatment at Victoria Hospital?
That's right.
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
In this particular instance, this was a decision made by the SHA in terms of how they conduct this part of their operations, Mr. Speaker, and we'll raise it with the leadership at the SHA. Again, I think they've explained publicly in the media the reason for the decision, Mr. Speaker. In the area of cancer care, I would just say that this government is making a record investments into the area of cancer care, significant investments into the cancer agency in this province, and a number of cancer-related programs and services, building capacity here in Saskatchewan to address the growing pressures when it comes to cancer in this province, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Recognize a member from Saskatoon-Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, I think these ministers need a lesson in ministerial responsibility. Mr. Speaker, if the Sask Party is trying to save a buck by forcing vulnerable cancer patients to pay for parking, they should really look in the mirror. They have a long list of healthcare mismanagement and waste where savings could be found. $240 million on the failed AIMS system. Millions paid for out-of-province surgeries and mammograms, money that's going to Sask Party friends and donors, and they'll have spent $139 million on contract nurses outside of Saskatchewan by December, Mr. Speaker. The list goes on and on. What does this say about the minister's priorities when cancer patients are paying the price for this government's mismanagement and waste?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government is proud to make record investments into healthcare. We're very grateful to the healthcare teams, the frontline staff that deliver this care. Mr. Speaker, whenever we have an opportunity, myself as ministers, MLAs on this side of the House, make sure that we engage with frontline healthcare providers to find ways to address challenges that we're facing in the system and also to build upon the successes that we have in our healthcare system, Mr. Speaker. In this year's budget, we're making a record investment of nearly $7.6 billion into a variety of areas of healthcare, Mr. Speaker. A 10.6% increase in healthcare funding over the previous year's budget. Mr. Speaker, investments into, as I've said previously, record investments into cancer care, into surgical care, Mr. Speaker, money for the Saskatoon and Regina capacity pressure action plans, more funding for health human resources, hiring and recruitment and retention, Mr. Speaker. The list goes on and on. We're going to continue to make those investments into our healthcare system, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon-Fairview.
It's not good enough, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this tired and out-of-touch government is too busy looking out for their friends and donors to look after Saskatchewan people. That's right. Dennis Ogrodnik, City Councillor in Prince Albert, first raised this issue in the media. He was undergoing cancer treatment at Victoria Hospital when free parking was abruptly stopped, and he had some thoughts to share. Quote, "I thought this was wrong. You were under a lot of stress, and that extra pay, it adds up. And it could become a financial burden and a stressful situation for parents." Mr. Speaker, how does this minister justify nickel and diming cancer patients in PA?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said previously, this was a decision made by the SHA. We'll have a further conversation with the SHA leadership about this decision and look further into it, Mr. Speaker. Again, I would say this, that we are making significant investments when it comes to the areas, many areas of cancer care, prevention, treatment, post-treatment, Mr. Speaker. The Saskatchewan Cancer Agency receiving $248.6 million in this year's budget, a $26.1 million increase over last year, $1 million to be provided to ovarian cancer research, Mr. Speaker, $3.5 million towards breast health in this province, including the establishment of a breast health centre here in Regina, which is something that has been long asked for by not only patients in southern Saskatchewan, but also by providers of healthcare services, Mr. Speaker, as a result of some of the ongoing collaboration and work that we have with those surgeons and others that work in the area of breast cancer, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue to make these investments.
Recognize a member from Regina Douglas Park.
Mr. Speaker, Regina continues to be hit hard by the overdose crisis. Year after year, Regina has recorded 2 times the amount of overdose deaths compared to Saskatoon. And now the Regina Police Service has released new statistics to show that it's getting worse. In March alone, there were 280 drug overdoses in Regina. That's over 100 more overdoses than January and February of this year. Mr. Speaker, this crisis is wreaking havoc in our communities, and it is leaving families without their loved ones. When will the Sask Party recognize that their choices to cut supports are causing more harm to people?
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just say that the harm that these individuals are experiencing is as a direct result of the drugs that they are using, and that is why our focus is on helping individuals overcome their addiction to those drugs, Mr. Speaker. Our government's focus is on treatment and recovery to help people overcome those addictions and live healthy lives, Mr. Speaker. To that end, our government has introduced a plan that will make it easier for individuals to access treatment spaces. We're more than doubling the amount of treatment spaces available, and we are focused on a recovery-oriented system of care that wraps supports around individuals and helps them find the path to recovery in a safe and healthy way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.